Good afternoon. Welcome to Convocation. Thanks for coming today. We got a little jazz going here in the background for Valentine's tomorrow. Happy Valentine's, everyone. My name's Steve Peterson. I run Convocation. Today we have a lot of guests to hear the new president of Snow College. And thanks for coming. But before I introduce him, I have a couple of other announcements. The play, Seven Brides for Seven Brothers, starts next week. Get your tickets today, right after Convocation. $3 with activity card. Across the foyer at the ticket office. Don't forget. The following students have been turning in cards, but you haven't signed up for Convocation. We appreciate your attendance. We're really happy you're coming, but you're not on the roll yet. Chris, Colin, Zachary, Hosa, Shannon Moore, and Jacob Powell. Talk to me out on the foyer directly after. Thank you very much. I hope you all got your schedules today. Next week, we have from Budapest, Hungary, Medal of Honor winner Andrei Hegedus to play the piano. Don't miss that one. Be here early, and be sure you get good seats so you can watch this maestro at the piano. I'd now like to introduce the Snow College Jazz Ensemble. Chelsea's going to tell you how to make a Valentine. Chelsea?
Okay, so we're from the Snow College Wind Ensemble, and we're trying to get to Costa Rica this spring break to play for underprivileged students and to play in their national concert hall out there. And so we're doing Valograms this year, and all you have to do is come and find me or pay at the box office. They're $5 for a Valogram, and you get to be sung too by Jeff Smith, so that's awesome. And so we actually have a Valogram right now from the president to Janet. So we're going to invite you to come on stage.
Here we go. L is for the way you look at me. O is for the only one I see. Oh, V is very, very extraordinary. E is even more than anyone that you adore. And love is all that I can give to you. Love is more than just a game for two. How to in love can break it. Take my heart, but please don't break it. Love was made for me and you. Kenny Fong. Hey, L is for the way you look at me. O is for the only one I see. Hey, V is very, very extraordinary. He's even more than anyone that you adore. And love is all that I can give to you. Hey baby, love is more than just a game for two. Oh, two in love can make it. Baby, take my heart, but please don't break it. Love was made for me, and love is made for me, and love is made for me and you.
This group will be out in the foyer at the end of Convocation. For $5, you get to have that sung to your girlfriend or boyfriend or person of choice. All right. Please take out your cell phones. I always forget this. And be sure to turn the cell phones off as you've agreed to do for Convocation. Thank you very much. This is going to be a very quick introduction because I don't want to lose any more time. President Gary Carlston is the interim acting president of Snow College, and we're certainly glad that he's here. He has had a long road to get back to where he started. He was a student at Snow College, raised in Fairview, north end of the valley. While he was here, he was president of the LDSSA and known to be a fantastic ping pong player, spent all of his time there playing ping pong. He met a lady who was going to school here at the same time. Her name was Janet, and so Snow College, if for nothing else, has made education worth it for him by finding Janet and getting married while they were here. He has served as an elementary school teacher, a middle school teacher, the superintendent of public schools at Cache County. He was the deputy superintendent of public education for the state of Utah, working out of the governor's office. He served on boards, and he was a member of, or was a member of the Snow College Board of Trustees. I don't think he's a member now because they're your boss, right? That's right, okay. We're very happy to have him return back to Sanpete County, and I hope you all get the right answer today to, is education worth it? President Gary Carlston.
It is so nice to be here. I'm going to add a little bit to Professor Peterson's introduction, especially of my wife. So, Janet, would you come up here, please? Again. And Jeff on the ensemble, that was terrific. Where else could you better spend $5 than that? So let's give them another hand. That was just amazing. The sad thing for me is that I have to follow that. You know, Janet and I did meet here at Snow College, and sometimes when we're with students, they ask us where we met. Now, I've told this story to a few students, but probably not all of you know this, and we remember it very clearly where we met. At least I do. We met in front of the Noise Building, and we were passing each other. And I looked at her, and I thought, she is so cool. So I tackled her. And then I wondered about this way of introducing myself. And then as soon as she grabbed me and kissed me, I knew I had done the right thing.
It gets better and better all the time.
You know, coming back to Snow College is just such an amazing experience for us, and although part of that story is true, not all of it is. She tackled me. No, that's not true either. By the time I finish this, you probably won't know what to believe. But actually, we truly did meet in front of the Noise Building, and what a great life experience we have had. And it started here at Snow College. And really, being the president for a period of time, any period of time, is an honor and a privilege. And I could not do it without my great wife. And we're a team. And so would you please acknowledge her for all she is and does? In the introduction, it was mentioned that I'm an educator. I'm a career educator. All of my career has been in education. Some of the positions that I have held were shared with you. There came a time in my career, I had been in the Logan School District office for 14 years. I'd held a couple of positions, and at the time I was superintendent of the school district. And sometimes being in leadership positions and administration can be challenging. And honestly, I found that my batteries were running just a little bit low because I like to be around people and I like to teach. And so we had an opening at an elementary school in the district, and the principal was retiring. I went to the Board of Education and I asked the board if I could take a leave of absence from being superintendent and go over and be the principal of the school for a year. Now, I thought for sure that I would probably lose my job as superintendent, and they would probably say to me, "You must not like this job, so we'll just let you go, and you can be principal and not worry about being superintendent." But that was not the case. In fact, they were very supportive. They thought it was a good idea. And so I did that for a year. And it was an amazing experience. I had the privilege and the opportunity again to interact with students and parents. I had to renew my skills as a teacher and as someone who had to operate and provide leadership for the school. But I also learned some other things. The title of my talk today to you is Education Worth It? Now, one of the things that I learned very quickly was one day when I was in the lunchroom supervising lunch, as elementary principals have to do as part of their responsibilities. This little first grade girl came up to me, and her name was Sarah. And she said to me, she said, "Mr. Carlston, are you married?" And I said, "Yes, why?" And then she said, "Mr. Carlston, are you rich?" And I said, "Well, not rich, but I have enough money." And she said, "Well," she said, "I was going to ask you to marry me if you're rich." First grade, she learned very early that education is worth it. One February day in Logan, sort of like this, except there was a major snowstorm. It snowed all day long. And the building, this elementary school building that we were in, was relatively new and had berms, or it had earth moved up against the foundation so as to provide better energy insulation. Well, with the combination of snow and the way the building was built with the earth around it, and on that particular day, there was just a lot of kids outside playing at recess and at lunch and after school and so forth. And of course, we had rules that you can't throw snowballs. I'm sure that, you know, in your schools as you grew up, that those were rules. And one of my other responsibilities was that I was supposed to go outside when the buses came and supervise the students as they got on the bus. Now, on this particular day, with the snow still coming down, it was that wet, heavy snow, easy to pack, and I went out, and usually I had other teachers who were helping me. But on this day, for some reason, they didn't come out. And I was out there all by myself. And compounded by being alone, I found that the buses were late. So we have a snowstorm, no help, and the buses are late. And I'm out there supervising a couple of hundred elementary students waiting for the buses, and snowballs are flying everywhere. Kids are up on these berms sliding down, and they're not supposed to be. There are problems in line. I get most of it straightened out. I use my best principal's voice, and I get most of it straightened out, but there are a couple of kids up on the hill that won't come down. And so I start up there to get them down, get part way, and turn around, and there's, you know, some problems back in the line. And as I'm doing this, I feel this tap on my shoulder. And I look over, and it's my friend Seth, who's a fifth grader. And Seth said, "Here, hold my violin." So I held his violin, and there was another problem, and I turned around. And when I looked up there, Seth was up there with those two kids, and he was just pounding on those kids. And then he obviously got the job done. They walked off the hill. And he came down to me, and he casually took his violin and walked on by, and he said, "Sometimes, Mr. Carlston, you're just too soft." Well, it's so good to be back here. I love this college. It has provided for me a great foundation, an enduring foundation that I had no idea that I might have when I came here. I must share with you that I came here as a rather immature student. I was unprepared. I really didn't know what college was all about. I came from a family where there was just my mother and siblings. And my mother was a wonderful woman. And she instilled in us the importance and value of education. She said it'll be worth it, even though she never had the opportunity to go on to college. But she instilled in us this great importance of education and that we should go to college. I was coming from a family that did not have much in terms of financial means. But following my friends and my mother's inspiration, I came to Snow College. And I have to tell you that on my first arrival here, that I was not very successful. I wasn't prepared for college work. I found out that I could miss class and nobody called my mother. I found out that the professors expected something from me, and I wasn't ready to produce. You see, I had this superficial understanding that college was important, that I should be here, but I had no idea of what was expected of me. Now jump forward a few years. Janet and I had an opportunity to provide some service for our church, and we found ourselves in the South Pacific on a very remote island near the equator called Kiribati. And if you were to look for this island, you wouldn't find Kiribati, you would find Kiribati, because they don't have an S in their alphabet. This is a long, narrow atoll. In fact, some parts of the island, this atoll, are only about 300 yards wide, and if I were a very good golfer, I could actually hit the ball across. It's a poor island. The soil is poor. The people are wonderful, but there's not a lot there. Our hosts took us to the outer end of the island, and they shared with us a major battle that had taken place there during World War II. As we stood on the sand and as we looked out over the lagoon, it was described to us of how the Americans had come with a brigade, with a flotilla of ships, and had intended on taking this island. It was their first air-hopping strategy, and they were going to take this island in a matter of 18 hours, but they found the resistance was much greater. And in fact, the resistance was so great that it didn't take 18 hours, it took 72 hours, and there were 1,100 plus American lives that were lost on that island and in the lagoon. The tide changed, and many of those soldiers were picked off as they tried to land in the lagoon. They couldn't get their armaments in. We saw the remains of some of those rusted armaments there on the beach. Now, I started my career after I graduated from Utah State as a social studies teacher. I was a history major. I had taught, I had learned, and I had tried to instill in others the importance of freedom and democracy. However, I had never felt it as I felt it that day, as at this remote, lost place where lives were given that I and now you might live in a free country, that we might have access to education and democracy. It touched me like nothing had really previously touched me before. My remarks today, especially about democracy, are centered around whether or not this great endeavor of education is worth it, not only to each of us as an individual, but to the country in which we live in. And so I want to share with you that, in my judgment, there are three great purposes for education that do make it worth it. The first one is to foster democracy. The second is to provide a workforce for this country, the economic engine, and to have a career. And the third is individual opportunity. My opportunities in life have been much greater because I had access to an education. I understand democracy much better and my obligations because I had an education. And of course, my career would not have been possible had it not been for places like Snow College. The wonderful thing that you have as students in front of you is you stand on the threshold of many, many opportunities. I hope that you are not like me in many ways when I came here first as a student. That is, I didn't have the vision. I didn't have what, in fact, was in front of me. I had lots of great professors who helped me, just like we have a great faculty and staff here now, but I didn't see it. Clayton Christensen, who is a Harvard professor and is one of the most world-renowned business thinkers, recently had a bout of cancer. And then he wrote a book that became a bestseller on the New York Times list. It's called How Will You Measure Your Life? And within this book, Clayton Christensen describes his own class experiences, how he went to some of the more elite universities, I think it was Harvard, and with many of the bright and intelligent students of his time, and there was so much potential in front of them. And then as they graduated and got married and went on to their lives and their careers, they began to have what I hope that you will have here as Snow College Badgers, reunions. Now, at the first 5-year reunion, Clayton Christensen relates in his book that a lot of people came and they were excited and they seemed polished. They'd gotten into their careers. They had families. They seemed happy. But as more 5-year reunions took place, things changed. Fewer people began to come back to the reunions. Some of the people had actually had problems in their careers. Some had had financial disasters. Some had not reached their potential in their careers. There were family difficulties and divorce and general unhappiness. So Clayton Christensen said that while this happened to some, many were very, very happy, but some just didn't have that opportunity and the potential fulfilled. As I speak to you today about the 3 purposes of education and how they relate to you, I'm going to speak to you about the importance of your own vision, along with understanding what you can gain by getting an education. Now, life can be challenging. One thing for sure is that the people that Clayton Christensen described did not intend for their lives to go into another direction. They had brilliant hopes and brilliant minds, but something happened. In your course, I urge you to think about not only education and career, but also those things that keep your course guided toward a happy personal life and all that can be rewarded from that. There's a story of Viktor Frankl. He was an Austrian psychologist who during World War II was placed in the Nazi death camps. Can you imagine the terrible, terrible things that were happening? And to have, because of your heritage, that you're placed into a death camp. As he was placed into that death camp, he began not only to be a person incarcerated in that camp, but he also became an observer of the other prisoners that were in that camp. Now, Frankl was a survivor. He made it through. But he began to observe the others that were in that camp with him. Many died and fell out early. But he was curious as to why did some die and why did some survive? Well, he looked into this in some of his research, and he found that what made it possible for some people to survive while others died, he looked at several factors, including their own health, their vitality, their family structure, their intelligence, their survival skills, that inner strength within themselves. While he said that they were all important, he finally concluded that the single most important factor was a sense of future vision. The future vision, this impelling conviction that those who were to survive had a mission to perform and some work left to do. He stated that vision is the best manifestation of creative imagination. As we consider this question, is education worth it, and where we all go, and especially you in your lives, I encourage you to develop this vision, to know who you are, and to decide, not let events or circumstances decide where you will go in life, but you decide where you're going to go in life and take every advantage of the opportunities that are presented to you. As a young man, I didn't have the vision, but I had people to help me, and when I came back to Snow College later, I found that I could gain the vision, and the faculty and staff and my classmates helped me. And over time, I've been able to see better what opportunities lie ahead. And hopefully the course of life that you follow will be that no event or no circumstance, like Viktor Frankl, would determine the outcome of your life. That you are the determiner, that you have the vision, and that you follow that pathway. Where did this public education come from, and why do we have it? Now I want to speak briefly about democracy as one of the main purposes. This country was founded as you know, through revolution and the development of the American government and the Constitution. The idea that there would be freedom and democracy and citizen participation. But that's not what the country or those colonies looked like at the time. In fact, there were relatively few that were rich and elite, and most were working their way and finding jobs and had little access to education. In fact, the education was so limited that only a few actually got to learn even beyond reading and writing. Few went on to high school and college. It just wasn't the case. But there was this thought by the Founding Fathers that if this young country was to survive and be what it could be, that it would be the people that would carry it, and only people, not only, but mostly people who understood democracy and were informed. And how do we transmit that to younger generations? I taught young people social studies, American history, and so forth, but where does that feeling come like Janet and I had when we stood on the beaches of Tarawa, the Red Sand Beach? Horace Mann, who was a politician and a lawyer at the time, about 40 years after the Constitution was written and adopted, Horace Mann was invited by the Massachusetts Board of Education to be the Secretary of Education. In essence, it was a new position, and like being the state superintendent of Massachusetts for this public school system that really hardly even existed. What existed were a lot of community schools out there. There was not really a statewide system. And so Horace Mann was asked to be the secretary. He wasn't sure he wanted to do this. He was a politician and a lawyer. And so one night he was in Philadelphia, and when he was in his room, he heard this loud commotion, screaming and yelling. And he went to his window and he looked down on the street and he saw people, in fact, he saw mobs of people who were fighting. It was night. And he looked down on them and he thought to himself, these mobs, these people are good people, but they have little opportunity, little access to education and jobs. If they had a job, they would have something to do and they would feel productive. Horace Mann accepted the position of Secretary of Education and went on to help found the public schools in this nation, where universal access, that is, not just those who were rich or elite or privileged could get an education, but everybody could have access to an education, and in the public school system, it would be free. The first country in the entire world to do this. And he made the argument for it, along with others, that it would serve democracy along with eliminating poverty. Roger Soder, in his book called The Purpose of Education and Schooling, said, and he's speaking to us about public schools and educating people for democracy, he said, "We are not born with a working knowledge of our rights and duties as citizens in a democracy. These are matters that are learned if a people can govern itself wisely." Where are they learned? For the most part, they're learned in public schools. We learn about the organization and structure and the rights and purposes of our government. Then we grow up and we become full-time citizens, and we participate in this democracy. Not everyone agreed that democracy, where the people actually governed, would be the right thing to do. In fact, Alexander Hamilton said this to Thomas Jefferson. Hamilton had more of a lack of faith in people. He thought that there should be more elite people governing, that you and I could not really participate in the democracy, that those that were born to privilege or higher education, that they should be the people who should be governing, not you and I. And so he proposed a representative form. We have a representative republic now, but he proposed a different kind of a republic, a more representative form, governed by these elites, to govern those who couldn't be trusted to govern ourselves. He said to Jefferson, he said, "Thy people are a beast." Can't do it. Can't trust us. Jefferson came back and said, the people could be prepared to participate and govern responsibly, and that schools would prepare citizens to debate and decide among competing ideas. You see, we participate in a democracy, but there are many competing ideas. We don't all agree on everything, but as a people, we get an opportunity to decide which of those ideas are going to work. There are many debates right now that we watch in Washington and in other state capitals and even other places around the world where we're trying to decide what ideas work. The important thing is that you and I as citizens get a chance to be heard in this debate. A second purpose for education is one that probably is on your minds, perhaps more than democracy. And I understand that. And that purpose is that you can get educated, get a career, get a job, and be able to support yourselves and your family. That you would contribute to the economy in this workforce. Now, you might anticipate that in the next few words that I say to you, that you should get on with picking a career, pick a major, finish your degree, and pursue your career so that you can take care of yourself and your family. And then you can contribute to the economy. You know, I am going to say that to you. That's exactly what you should do. You should be focused. You should not waste any opportunity to move in that direction. It will pay for itself all of your lives, and you'll never regret it. I do ask you this. It's important. It's part of the vision, the self-determination that I referred to earlier that I hope that you will take on. It'll make a positive difference for you, your family, the neighborhoods that you live in, if you'll do those things, if you'll finish your education. But I want to clarify something to you, that that's not all, that there's more to it than that. In a book that is entitled "The World is Flat" by Thomas Friedman, a New York Times columnist, written about 9 years ago, he said that while he was sleeping, the technology explosion took place in the world, and it flattened it out. It's no longer round because the world now is flat, meaning, in his book, that what we used to be able to do in our economy and jobs and so forth is all now changed because of the technology. That people all over the world can access technology and do things that they previously couldn't do with their jobs and careers. In California, you've probably heard of the Silicon Valley, this great technology center. Most of us have driven I-15 to go to Salt Lake, and as we get up in northern Utah County and around Thanksgiving Point, well, we begin to see all of these new buildings, technology buildings. Even a brand new Adobe building there just off the side to the east. You know what they're beginning to call that area now? They're not calling it Silicon Valley, they're calling it the Silicon Slopes. Do you know that Governor Herbert was back in New York working with one of the CEOs of a major company? And Governor Herbert was trying to stimulate more jobs for Utah, and he talked to this company who already had a presence in Utah and said, can you create 300 more jobs there? And it was in the technology area. And the CEO said, yes, we can do that, just as soon as you'll fill the jobs there in Utah that you haven't filled for my company. If Utah is going to grow and the Silicon Slopes are going to take place, it will take an educated workforce and people like you that get their degrees and have the skills and the talents and the competency to help that become truly Silicon Slopes. In Friedman's book, he goes on to say something else that he learned in this flat world, that while the qualifications are very important, there are some other things in this new technological world that are going to be just as important for you to have in your careers. Now, I'm not going to list all of the ones that Friedman talked about, but one is collaboration. That is, people can't work in isolation anymore, that they'll have to collaborate, have to be able to work together and talk about what is the best way to do things and to create things. I told you that I'm an educator and I'm proud to be a teacher, but the perception of my profession is that teachers are isolated and that they don't collaborate. That's all changing. That those of you who may be interested in becoming a teacher, it will be expected of you that you collaborate, that you work with your colleagues, and that you're no longer simply isolated in the classroom. A second skill that he talks about in his book is synthesizers. Those that can take ideas that don't seem to match up and put them together. Perhaps a scientist and a musician that take disparate parts and put them together, to synthesize it, that creative thinking. He also speaks of explainers, that with the world of technology, not all of us know how to use it, and there's so many new products that people are going to have to explain it. And he describes these people as managers, teachers, writers, and producers, journalists, be able to take something that's fairly complex and explain it simply to others. I think you see the direction that this is moving. Successful careers will mean competence. You will need your degree to get a good job and a strong career pathway. But you're also going to need people skills. Now, I'm not saying that in every job and every career that will be the case, because I'm sure that there will be some that will be able to work from home and work in isolation. But for the larger part, even through technology, you'll be collaborating, you'll be communicating. You will need people skills if you're going to be successful. The ability to communicate, the ability to explain and think creatively will become part of it. Just like when you take some of your courses, even now, you're going to have to integrate some of those courses. You may be taking a science class or a math course here and an English course, but you're going to be asked to do some writing around those math and science areas. That will really help you as you prepare for your career to be able to integrate those skills. A few years ago, while I was on faculty at Utah State University, I received a call from then Governor Leavitt, the governor of the state of Utah, from his office. And he asked if I would come down and visit with him about a possible job for his staff. I was reluctant to do so, but I did go down and honored his request. And for an hour, I sat with he and his chief of staff, and they interviewed me and asked me some questions, and honestly, I was a bit intimidated. I hadn't really been around the governor that much, or any governor for that fact, and I was a bit intimidated, not knowing what to say or do. Ultimately, after another discussion with Governor Leavitt, he invited me to be a part of his staff and asked me to be the deputy for education in Utah, the governor's staff. A few months later, after I'd gotten to know the governor better, I still wondered why he would ask me to do it. He and I were visiting, and as we visited briefly, alone, it was very informal, I said to him, "Governor, why did you ask me to come and do this? Because there are many people who are qualified and probably a lot more people who are more qualified than I am." And he said, "You're right. You have to be qualified to do this job. The qualifications aren't enough." And then he said to me, "Gary, I'm looking for someone who will be a part of the team. I'm looking for someone that we have chemistry together." And his definition and interpretation of chemistry was people chemistry. People that could get along. People who would, for the governor, not just say, "Yes, that's a great idea," but very respectfully say, "This isn't a good idea," and still work within that team. I hope that my experience, as I share with you here today, is that as you get into your careers, that you have chemistry with the people that you work with, that you communicate well with them, that you respect them, and that you can work within the scope of different ideas and not feel threatened because it's not my idea, or I'm afraid to say something for fear that it won't be accepted as a good idea. It's much more likely to happen that you will have chemistry with the people that you work with if, in fact, you are respectful. Finally, with careers, a couple of things. Learn how to learn. Janet and I know this. She's since just passed away. 95 years old. Grew up in Salina. Did not have any experience with computers. But when the technology age came, she was on it all the time. She could do it. Now I'd like to probably get to some things that you're really interested in. Let's go to the next PowerPoint slide. Of course you want to get a job. Of course you want to be a good citizen. Of course you want to have a happy family. But let me show you some things that make a difference. This is a slide, Earnings and Unemployment by Educational Attainment. The red side is unemployment. The green side is median earnings. And notice at the very top, the more education that you get, the more money you're going to make, and the fewer people that with higher degrees of education are going to be unemployed. There's no guarantee that anyone would be unemployed, but just think that there are many more opportunities to be employed and to make more money if, in fact, you're educated. The benefits of higher education to the individual. This is a Utah slide. Notice once again, if you look at the blue slide with less than a high school diploma and the 11% at the top, you're going to make much less money, and again, reinforcing the idea that there will be more potential for being unemployed. I spoke with you in the next slide to the economy. We're all contributors to the economy. Notice here, and most people don't want to pay taxes. They don't voluntarily jump in and say, "Let me pay more taxes," but it's taxes, it's our public contribution that helps establish institutions like Snow College. Notice that bachelor's degree and higher, that they will pay more taxes. But that means that they're going to make more money and have more opportunity. In the next slide, referring to democracy, and one of the great purposes, look at who voted in the 2010 election by educational attainment. On the left-hand column, in your age group, for the most part, 18 to 24, high school dropouts only 5%. But if you go across and you look at not only age and educational attainment, more educational attainment means more participation in our democracy as indicated by voting. Perhaps Jefferson and Mann were correct. The next slide goes specifically to 18 to 24-year-olds, educational attainment, and this is the 2010 election. And you can see once again that education makes a difference in terms of participation as measured by voting. The next slide, and I'm moving quickly because I know we're out of time, is a little more comprehensive. It tells us that when you consider age, education, and income, if you put it all together, that if you have more education, you're going to have more income, and you're more likely to participate in the democracy and vote. Mann and Jefferson were right, and all the people in the last 200 years were right, that education sustains democracy, that education provides career and opportunity and can eliminate poverty, and provide happy lives and provide individual opportunities. I hope within your own life, in your own lives, that your vision is that your education will take you places not only individually, but also for your family and for the society, and you'll help provide for others. While I was working for Governor Leavitt, sometimes governors do ceremonial things. So after the legislature was finished, there was a bill that was passed about foster children, encouraging people to take children into their homes and help take care of them. So he held a ceremonial signing in the Gold Room at the Capitol and asked some of the foster parents to bring the foster children there. Had a very nice ceremony. A lot of people attended. And I went out in the hallway, and there was this little girl in white shoes and a pink dress, and she was crying. She was in tears, about 7 or 8 years old, and I said, "What's the matter?" And she came to see the governor, but she didn't really get to see the governor. She was, in fact, just there sort of as a representative of this initiative that the governor was launching. She was sad. She was crying. I felt badly. And I thought, here we are. We're supposed to be taking care of others. Well, we alerted the rest of the staff. The governor took some time, took her into his office, and he cared for her. I hope that you will care for each other, for others that may not be as fortunate to be here in school, who would like to be here in school. I hope that for you and the great faculty and staff here at Snow College, that you enjoy every moment and take advantage of these educational opportunities. And I would like to close with a quote from Horace Mann, as he helped found this great educational enterprise across the United States and influenced the world. At the completion of his 12 or 13 years in this position I told you that he had in Massachusetts, he wrote this report. He wrote an annual report every year, but here's what he said. He said, "Education, then, beyond all other human devices, is the great equalizer. It is the equalizer of the conditions of men or people, the balance wheel of our social machinery. It does a lot better than to disarm the poor of their hostilities. It prevents being poor. I can guarantee you that you'll be neither poor in life or opportunity or career if you'll take advantage of this. Is education worth it? It absolutely is. I thank you, and I just say to you, thank you for coming, and go Badgers. Thank you.